Hey all, here at OS Reviews. You're watching our video review of the Chewy Surebook Mini. This is a 2-in-1 tablet running on Windows 10 Home Edition, and it features a form factor that's very similar to the Microsoft Surface line, such as the Surface Pro or the Surface 3, and it features a 10.1-inch IPS display that's fully laminated, which means that there is no gap between the display as well as the glass on top, and it has wide and generous viewing angles in addition to a rich 1080p Full HD resolution. Otherwise, the tablet itself is running on the Intel Celeron N3450 processor. That's a quad-core chipset that is clocked up to 2.2 gigahertz on the max speed, and it's more than sufficient for running day-to-day tasks as well as for light productivity. It's going to struggle a little bit more for more intensive productivity, such as for Photoshop, but for basic web browsing it does a pretty good job, and it's a standard chipset on most of these middle-end / budget-oriented tablets I've been seeing running on Windows. It features 4 gigabytes of built-in DDR3 RAM and 64 gigs of built-in eMMC, which is expandable via micro SD card. And it also has an optional stylus that you can pick up that supports palm rejection for handwriting recognition. So at 10 inches, this is definitely going to be slightly smaller than a 12-inch or a 14-inch tablet. It means it's more portable and easier to take with you. Inside the packaging itself, there's not too many accessories pre-included, but there is an optional kind of keyboard in the same style as the Type keyboard, Surface Type keyboard, that you can pick up yourself if you want to use it as a true 2-in-1. Otherwise, the construction quality is top-notch. In fact, it's equally as impressive as on a real Microsoft Surface. It's as good as an Apple iPad. The screen here is coated in a tempered glass material, and the entire frame is made out of a unibody aluminum alloy, so it feels very substantial and well put together. The back here features a 5-megapixel camera. There is the Chewy logo, and the kickstand has another unique trick that differentiates itself from the Surface, in that it's completely adjustable, so it's quite stiff, but it goes all the way back to 125 degrees if you want it to be. At this extreme angle, it allows you to more easily kind of type with the on-screen keyboard, so you can have it popped up like this and begin typing. Vice versa, I can fold it to a steeper angle if I'm watching media or movies on my lap. Down below here you can see the Intel logo, the Surebook Mini, and there's also the micro SD card slot for expanding the built-in memory. On the edge of the tablet, you'll find access to 2 USB 3.0 ports. There's also access to a USB Type-C port that's used for charging, as well as for additional hubs, such as connecting to an HDMI adapter, connecting to headphones, other accessories like that. One thing I'm not a huge fan of is because they're using a tapered design, the port here is actually slightly recessed, and it's difficult to plug in if you don't have a cable that has a long enough head. Even though it uses USB Type-C, it does require a power adapter that is sufficiently powerful, such as the one that's pre-included. If you just plug it into a cable and then the other end goes into a power bank or into your computer, it's not sufficient to drive and charge the unit. There is a standard 3.5mm headphone port on the side, and on the top there's access to a power switch and also a volume rocker, which are both tactile and responsive and made out of metal. So build quality again is very good, and again it's quite slim as well. What looks like ventilation grills is actually just for decorative purposes, because this is a passively cool tablet. It's a fanless machine, which means it's completely silent during operation. As a quick size comparison with a Microsoft Surface, you can see that it's about the same in terms of the overall dimensions, and again the construction and weight are neck and neck, so there's not a huge difference here. It really is well constructed for a tablet that sells for about $250 online. With the unit on, the first thing we're going to talk about is going to be the battery performance. It gets fully charged up in around 4 hours, so it's not lightning fast, but it's good enough, I would say. USB Type-C with the included adapter does charge it up fairly fast. Afterwards, it's going to get you roughly 6 to 7 hours of web browsing and continuous use. If you're pressing it harder and doing more graphically intensive tasks, such as, let's say, trying to edit a photo or something, and if you're using Chrome as opposed to Internet Edge, that will also drain the battery a little bit faster, closer to 5.5 or 6 hours. So it's not going to be outstanding battery life, compared to, let's say, an iPad might get 10 hours. But with that being said, more than does the job for a full workday, and you can charge it up when you get home. And furthermore, depending on what you do, if you toggle Wi-Fi on and off, you can adjust the screen brightness. It will last you longer as well. On the top here, there's access to a webcam which you can use for conference calls, and it works sufficiently well. It doesn't do quite as nicely under low light environments, but overall not too many complaints there. The bezel size on the unit are also respectable. It's easy to also hold the tablet using your hands without too many issues. And the aspect ratio is also slightly unique. It's not really a widescreen 16:9 aspect ratio like we're used to on a lot of these Windows and Android tablets by Chinese OEMs. It's not quite 4:3 or boxy either, but it's somewhere in between. So it does give you a slightly boxier display, which means that for navigating the web, for spreadsheets, it is pretty comfortable to use in either orientation. Speaking of, there is of course Wi-Fi, Bluetooth on board, so all the connectivity options are good. In terms of Wi-Fi reception, it also seems to be fairly stable and strong. Right now we are on a different level from the router, but you can see that the connection range is still, the signal is still being displayed as full bars. So Wi-Fi speed, no real complaints there either. Taking a quick look at memory management, again, we do have about 64 gigabytes on board. A part of that is taken up by the operating system, so we have about, you can see here, 38 gigabytes left. So that's not a ton of memory, but it is good enough for storing some light files. I would suggest storing most media collections on a thumb drive or a hard drive instead of putting it on here directly, because again, it doesn't have a large hard drive built in, but not too much of an issue. You can complement it with a micro SD card up to 128 gigabytes if you want to. Alright, so the screen itself also, you can see here, has pretty good viewing angles, and it is quite sensitive and responsive with no real complaints as far as navigation is concerned. And again, it does support up to 5 fingers of multi-touch without any issues either. Next, let's talk a little bit about the web browsing performance. So this is also a good opportunity to check out the keyboard. And you can access the keyboard by swiping over on the edge of the device's screen to bring up the task kind of manager. And if we go over to tablet mode, what that does is simplifies the interface for use with your finger. So for instance, if I tap on the Windows key now, it's going to bring me to this tile interface, pretty reminiscent of Windows 8 with Metro UI. It's pretty sensitive and gives you access to things like games, as well as quick utilities, other tools and programs which I can cycle through and access. You can see there is a slight hesitation sometimes when navigating around when there's too many kind of menus and programs, but at the same time, it really is snappy enough. You do have access to a pretty clean install of Windows 10, so it does give you the essentials such as Cortana for voice assistant. There's also access to the Windows Hello for unlocking the device using biometrics, and you can add your own accessories. And of course, there's also some mobile versions of Microsoft Essentials built on in, but not the full version of Word, Excel, or PowerPoint. You have to install that yourself. But again, you have a good idea that this is a pretty light install with a few expected utilities on board. All right, so let's go into Chrome next, which is still my favorite browser, just because I think it's going to be the most optimized to run the smoothest, especially on slightly lower end hardware. 4 gigs of RAM is more than sufficient for multitasking. You can open up, let's say, 7 to 10 tabs without any real problems. It really does a good job in terms of keeping things up to speed, and it plays back video files without any issues either. So if I tap on a menu, or a address bar, this is where the on-screen keyboard will pop up automatically. And you can see that's quite spacious and comfortable to type on. It is a keyboard that will support multi-touch, so you have the ability to, again, tap on hold on multiple letters and then create commands like cut or paste, and that works pretty well. So you can see that the keyboard does a pretty good job if you're typing on here on screen, even if you don't want to get the optional type keyboard or connect a wireless Bluetooth keyboard. So those are a few options that you can consider. So let's go over to YouTube and take a look at how well it loads a sample video. Again, the Intel Celeron processor will be faster than your Intel Atom chipset. It's also going to be smoother. Once a page is completely loaded, it does a good job of pinch to zoom and re-rendering the page without too much slowdowns or stuttering in between. So it's loaded up without too much delay. There's not too much latency between scrubbing and parts of the video either. And again, you can really enjoy a lot of media content comfortably with this tablet because the screen is excellent. The laminated panel is bright, it's vibrant, and has good color reproduction in addition to overall brightness as well. Again, scrolling between parts of the video works without too many problems. And again, it does a good job. I should mention that the speaker is coming out of the edge of the tablet, so it's not the richest sounding speaker, but overall it works. For watching a few quick movies. I would still recommend plugging in headphones for the best audio experience, but that's something just to keep in mind. It's not front-facing, but at the same time, it's not mounted on the back. Here's the New York Times, and you can see it loaded up actually surprisingly quick. New York Times is a good benchmark as a complex page with many elements as well as advertisements. There are videos, there are ads, there are banners, there are scrolling elements, which are difficult for a device that has a low-powered CPU or low-powered configurations to usually render quickly. But on here, it seems to actually do a fairly respectable job. You can see scrolling up and down, not too much of a delay, and still feels actually quite smooth. Pinch to zoom also works really well. So this really makes for a great web browsing experience as expected. It's a full Windows machine, so you have all the power of installing legacy Windows apps. That includes very light maybe games, productivity tools, all the things that you could find online through Google can be installed. At the same time, it makes for a good good entertainment option as well for things like web browsing and video watching, as we demonstrated earlier. So pretty good hybrid tablet for those purposes. All right, so that's web browsing. Again, fairly impressive on this unit. Transitioning into the camera as well as the performance of the kind of images taken by the sensor, this is by the rear-facing camera. Now, it's not an autofocus sensor, so it's going to do best in landscape shots where objects are further away from the sensor, as opposed to macro shots that are really up close. Overall, though, you can see that colors are fairly decent, but there's not a huge amount of detail to work with. Cameras on a tablet are just for emergency situations anyways, but on here, you can see that it does a good job in decent lighting environments, and you can also take images of documents, for instance, and scan it in. So it works for those basic tasks, but I wouldn't use this as a primary camera or anything like that. You have the standard Windows interface for editing as well as deleting and sharing by emails and attachment, things like that, and again, some other images to take a look at. This is what a close-up shot looks like. Not too bad either, but again, not nearly as detailed in terms of the resolution or as sharp as a flagship smartphone. But overall, it does work. Front-facing camera is very similar in terms of performance. It's slightly worse because the resolution is not quite as high, but overall, you get the idea of what the image quality of the unit is like, which is to say, decent, but again, not outstanding, but it works. When it comes to gaming, I wouldn't really recommend, really heavy games to be run on here. You can definitely run Minecraft without too many issues. Other titles that you can download from the Microsoft Store, which are primarily geared for mobile gaming, such as, again, March of Empire, you can look at Asphalt 8, will work just fine. It's basically, the same experience you would get on a smartphone, like on Android. It runs pretty smooth without too many frame rate issues. The tablet does have an accelerometer, so you do have the ability to kind of switch the orientation and tilt to navigate through the games without too many problems, so that works fine. But if you are trying to play more demanding PC-specific titles, then that's where it might get more challenging in terms of the frame rates, since it doesn't have really a true dedicated graphics card, and also the processor is still relatively entry level, so that's something to quickly keep in mind. Photoshop, very light, editing will work, but if you are trying to edit video files that are too large, if you're trying to do too many layers, that's where you'll see some slowdown. But overall, it works nicely. You can see that there are kind of sketchbook apps that are pre-installed or at least suggested that works well with the stylus. It's not a pressure-sensitive stylus. It only has one mode, but for handwriting and some quick sketches, it is a nice option to consider if you want to pick up the optional stylus, which will sell for about $30 separately instead of coming with the package. So that's the Chuwi Surbook Mini. This is a good 2-in-1 on a budget. For under $250, you're getting something with better build quality than on more generic models, perhaps by Insignia. You get a much better build that is crafted out of aluminum, a really sleek unibody finish, a nice kickstand that's quite stable and easy to use, and also more than enough ports for accessories and additional peripherals. Performance is also good enough for most folks to use as a secondary machine. It's not going to replace a more powerful, laptop with an i-series processor, an i5 or an i7, but at the same time, for things that you would want to use, like for browsing the web, watching videos, for some light productivity through Microsoft Office, Excel, PowerPoint, or Google Word, Excel, or PowerPoint, it does a great job. The overall web browsing experience is smooth, and for light mobile gaming, it also does a good job. The benefits of having, again, a full Windows operating system means you can install many more legacy apps than you would on a mobile OS, such as on Android, which is still not quite as powerful as something as full-blown Windows that you have here. Granted, it doesn't have the best internals in the world, but it really has a beautiful display, and again, the bottom line is performance is really good enough. The Intel Celeron chipset that's built on here, coupled with 4 gigs of RAM and with eMMC instead of a hard drive, means that performance is fairly snappy for most day-to-day tasks, and it will be significantly faster than an Intel Atom counterpart. At the same time, you do have the ability to start using it for more productivity tools, but of course still enjoy it for entertainment. You can check out more details about the Chuwi SureBook Mini in our official written review coming out soon. But for now, this has been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. This has been the Chuwi SureBook Mini 2-in-1 convertible Windows 10 tablet.